In this exercise, we're going to work on the lapped zipper. And the reason it's called the lapped zipper is because the top actually laps over the underneath. It actually laps over the zipper, concealing it. And you actually don't even see the seam underneath. So that's why we call it the lapped zipper. So you're actually going to need a zipper. For this exercise, you'll need to get one of these plastic polyester coil zippers. And even though that I have a shorter zipper length on this one, a 7-inch or a 9-inch will do, because we will shorten it. And if you don't remember how to shorten the zipper, revisit level 1 in the railroad zipper exercise. I explain how to shorten that zipper. So there are two pattern pieces, and on this pattern piece here, this is actually the garment where we're going to be inserting the zipper, and I have several notches here. I have a notch up here and a notch down here, and these are our seam allowance notches. That, again, is going to be this area here, this folded edge, and then this folded edge. That's the seam allowance. So we'll need to punch those out. The notch down here is actually the length of the zipper. So this is where the zipper stops. So if you look here on the finished zipper, all the way down here, this is where the opening of the zipper stops. And that's what this notch indicates. So I need to get those all punched out. All right. And we'll consider this area below the notch the rest of the garment. Now, there's another pattern piece here that is actually written all in red, unless you've printed your patterns in black and white. This says to cut to fusible, and that's only in the fusible. We're not going to need to cut that out of the fabric because we're using this to stabilize the seam while we insert the zipper. So again, the fusible that I like, interfacing that I like, is the Pellon EK130 Easy Knit interfacing. And I use interfacing and fusible kind of interchangeable. So if I say fusible, that just means the interfacing. So we're going to cut 2 out of this, and we're going to cut 2 out of the self. So I'm going to do that really quick. And also one more thing before I get to the cutting. So because we have a zipper and it's going on 2 different pieces of fabric, I have a left and a right. Or if this goes on the side of, say, a skirt, then you would have a front and a back. So when we use this pattern, when I put it on the fabric, I'm going to have to lay one face up, and then I'll have to flip it over to get the same opposite or mirrored piece, all right? And you'll see me do that in just a couple of minutes. Okay, so I'm going to set the patterns aside, and I'm going to get my fabric. Okay, so now that we have everything cut out, I need to identify the face side. I'm going to do that really quick. Now that we've identified the face side, I need to actually apply my interfacing or fusible to the wrong side of these pieces. And where I'm going to apply it is actually on the seam allowance. And I'm going to flip these over, and then I'll put them side by side. I'll do this, just kind of move them here so that I'm matching these notches here. And let me just draw this line. This is erasable pen. This is my line. This will disappear when I iron this. So this is my stop line, and this is the bottom, the below the zipper of the garment. And I have my notches. One is up here at the top of the garment or the top of the zipper, and one is down here, just so you can see where I have all of these notches. Now, where we apply our interfacing is where we're going to be installing the zipper. So this interfacing piece, the textured side is the glue side, and we want that to go to the wrong side of the fabric. So I'm going to apply this interfacing here. So the fusible interfacing will actually extend beyond the seam allowance notch into the garment 1/4 of an inch, and it will extend below the zipper stop notch about 1 inch. We want it to be that way so that when we fold over on this edge, we'll get a nice curved edge on our the right side of our zipper edge. And then we want it to go below this because we want to make sure that all the stitching in here gets caught and there's still some stability below the zipper, because we're going to actually have the zipper hanging a little bit below that as well. So we want stability all the way around that. So again, I will just apply this from the top of the zipper to below, and you do want the interfacing to extend beyond all of those notches. So now let's take this over to the ironing mat and we'll press this on. Okay, so we're ready to continue working on the lapped zipper, but there are a couple of things we need to do before we get started. So first, I have a zipper here, and I will let you know that this piece here is much shorter than what you would normally have in the real world. And this is the area from this notch up to the top is actually where we're going to be installing the zipper, and from below the notch is actually where the rest of the garment would be. And this is, of course, much shorter than it would naturally be. So the zipper that I have is much longer than the area for where we're installing the zipper. So I'm going to shorten this zipper. Now, you've already learned how to shorten the zipper in level 1, so I'm not going to show that on camera. But what I am going to do is I'm going to line up the top of the zipper. I like to start with the top here, because if I have my 1/2 inch seam allowance for my waistband, it still gives me enough space between that seam and the stop for the zipper pull to not be in the way. So I'm going to line up the top of my zipper to the length of the zipper on the garment. That's this notch. And then I'm going to mark on the zipper tape where I want to shorten it. And I'm going to go up about 1/4 inch. And that's actually where I'm going to stop the zipper. And then I'll cut off from that point about 1 inch below that. That's where I'll cut off the rest of the zipper. So I will do that off camera. And then the other thing that I need to do is I need to clean finish this edge. So I'm going to overlock this edge, and you did a lot of overlocking in level 1, so you don't need to see me do just an overlock on the edge. But what I will do after overlocking is come back and reestablish this notch down here. So I'm going to go ahead and do that right now, and then I'll come right back to the table and I will explain the zipper the beginning of the installation of the zipper. Okay, so I've shortened the zipper and I've overlocked each side of the seam, and I've reestablished my notches, which are right here and here. So all I need to do now is I'm going to place these face sides together, matching the notches up here, the top and the bottom, and then also here at the side. And I'm going to take a couple of pins, and I'm just going to pin actually right there at that notch. And then below, you can of course pin above it. And let me see if I can get this pin in here. So what we're going to do is we're going to sew from this notch, which is the bottom of the zipper, at 3/4 an inch, because that's what our seam allowance is. It's 3/4 inch seam allowance. I'm going to sew from here down to finish the seam. We're not going to sew above where the zipper is going to be placed. We're only going to close the seam from the notch down to the bottom of the garment. So we'll start with a back stitch and sew, and then back stitch at the end. Okay, so our seam is sewn, and I'm just gonna give that a quick press just to flatten that a little bit. Now we are going to lay this flat and press that seam open here where that was. But before we do that, let's flip this over to the face side real quick and have a look-see. So this is the face side of the garment, and we need to decide which side the lap is going to be on. Now the lap is the side that covers the zipper from being seen, okay? So if this is the right side of the garment, this is my right hand, this is my left, and this is the way the garment is going to be worn. If the zipper were on the left side, then I would want my lap to be on the right side, which is this. It would lap over that side. Now if I have the zipper on my right side, I would want the left side to lap over. And that's just because it's easier to get in there, and it would actually cover that seam as well. But if it's in the back, if you're putting the zipper in the back, you'll have to decide if you're right-handed or left-handed, depending on which way you're going to reach around. And the way that you would figure that out, depending on you're left-handed or right-handed, is which hand is going to go under the lap to grab the zipper pull. So in this instance, I'm going to have the right side be the lap. So I'm going to just right here, this is erasable pen, this is my right side, and this is going to be my left side. So the reason I need to know that is because even though I have notches up here, there are going to be different ways that the different sides are going to be different seam allowances. However, the notch indicates how the lap matches up. So on the right side, since the lap is going to be on the top, when we press this open, we're going to keep the right side the 3/4 inch seam allowance. And this is the right side. Okay? So I'm going to just go ahead and press this nice and flat, this seam allowance all the way up. Okay? So that's nice and flat. Now on the opposite side, this side, the left side, we're only going to press it over, we're not going to press it over 3/4, we're going to subtract 1/8 of an inch from that, and we're only going to press this over 5/8. And what that will do is that extra 1/8 of an inch will be hidden under the other seam allowance. So this is 5/8. Your ruler, that's 5/8. Do a little there at the top, and then and this will actually lap over. See how it's already lapping over? Here it'll lap over the other seam allowance, and let's just measure that for 5/8. Okay, 5/8. Now even if you're using an inch seam allowance or a different seam allowance and you want the lapped zipper, it's still going to be 1/8 of an inch less than the opposite seam allowance. Okay, so now what happens is that we still have this seam, and that seam rides up the 3/4 inch seam allowance, but if you look at my notch here and my notch here, when I match those up, the lap is completely hidden underneath. So we're going to actually start with the underneath side, and I'm going to lie the zipper along that, and I'm going to lay this side, my left side, on that zipper, right on top of that zipper, and I'm going to pin it, and I'm going to top stitch this zipper down to the zipper tape, or rather the garment down to the zipper tape. Grab some pins, and I'm just going to pin this, and of course I can reposition it once I get in there in the machine, but this is approximately where I want this to be, so I'll just pin this. Now I'm going to lap this over this side, and I'm going to actually stitch all the way down onto the seam allowance, right? Okay, so put that last pin in there, and now let's go ahead and have the look at this again. So I've got this lined up here. So I'm going to use my zipper foot, probably my cording foot, because I can get in there a little bit closer than my narrow foot. So I'll show you which cording foot I'm using once I get into the machine. Okay, so I'm going to sew this side, and then we'll be right back here. Okay, so here I am at the machine, and I have everything still pinned just like I did before. And let's look at the feet. So I want to use a cording foot, and the cording feet are these skinny, narrow feet with this little cutout here. And I have 2 of them, okay? And I have a left and a right. And I actually want to use the left one because we want to be able to get close in here to the edge of that fabric. If you can go ahead and see it, we want this to ride like that. If I did it with this other foot, the stitching would be on the other side. That's where the needle is going to go. So, and we actually may need to use this one a little bit later. So I'm going to go ahead and switch out the feet, and I'll be right back. Okay, so I've got the cording foot on, and I switched that out, and now we're ready to sew. But before I do that, I'm actually going to open up the zipper, and that will make it a little bit easier. I'm going to start up here at the top. I'm going to start with the back stitch. Get that in there. And I'm actually going to put the needle down to hold that, and I'll remove this pin. And I'm sewing with a regular stitch length, 12 to 14 stitches per inch. And I'm going to start with the back stitch. And then you want to sew right along here, close to the edge of that fabric. And of course, remove your pins as you go. Now I'm coming up to about the middle of the length of the zipper. So at this point, when I'm going to come down here, I don't want to be worried about the pull. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure my needle is down, lift the presser foot, and I'm actually going to close the zipper. And make sure that my edge of my fabric is still close to the zipper. And I can see that better if I fold this other side over on top of that fabric. Okay, so now I can see where I'm going to go with this. So I'm going to put my foot back down, I remove that needle, and I need to make sure that I keep my fabric close to the teeth of the zipper. So I'm just going to continue to sew. Slow, and I'm going to try to get right on top of here through the bottom of the zipper. And I'll just backstitch. Try not to get on any of the other part of the fabric. I was a little bit narrow there, and I'll show you what I mean. But narrow, I was a little narrow here in, see how wide I am here? I was a little bit narrow down here, but that's okay, it's not gonna matter. So now we've got our one side done, and if we look at this, this will lap right over on top of that. So we're going to actually pin this over at the pressing mat. We'll prepare this side. So let's go over to the pressing mat. Okay, so we've got our under part of our zipper all stitched on, and now we actually we're going to top stitch our lap on. And if we look at, this is where the notch is, and then if I match the other notch, it's going to completely cover that. Now, when we top stitch this, we need to decide how far from this edge we're going to stitch. And I have a 3/4 of an inch seam allowance. So we need to do at least half of that, which is 3/8. We can go up to a 1/2 inch depending on, let's have a look at this. If you can see here where the overlocking starts. Now, of course, we could go over and stitch this here, depending on how wide your overlocking is that we really want to be stitching somewhere right about here, because at that point, that's where the stitching will be, and we want to make sure that the zipper pull can go up and down and not be bothered with where that stitching is. So if I mark that, I'm hitting at about 3/8 of an inch. So we want to actually stitch at least 3/8 of an inch from this folded edge. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to lie this flat here, and I'm going to mark, actually I just want to move that away, and I'm going to mark 3/8 of an inch from that edge. And this will be my stitch line, basically. Now the other line that we need to mark is, this is the bottom of where the zipper is, the opening. So I need to mark that. and I'm just going to use this straight edge to make sure it's straight across, right? And then we'll just go back up here, just draw that line. So we're going to start here and stitch to this point and then pivot all the way up. But I'm going to go ahead and pin this down. I want to pin this here, but notice that I have this big lump here, and that's where the zipper pull is. So I'm going to have to unzip this because I want to make sure, let me kind of show you on the other side. Let me go ahead and pin part of half of this down. Okay, so that's where it's pinned. But if I open this up and I show you on this underside, I've got this pull here, and this other part may come over here on this side. So once we get halfway done, we're going to have to reposition this on the top of that tape. Okay, so if I'm unzipping this, I need to make sure that this tape stays in the same alignment. So I'll have to do that in the machine. Okay, even though I could probably take a pin and kind of go like this. Maybe I'll just go ahead and keep this here so we can see what happens. So if I close the zipper, see they still kind of match, but my pin is way over here. We still want that 3/8 stitching. We don't want it to get out of alignment. So we'll just be really careful about that, all right? I'm gonna keep everything like this for right now. For going over into the machine, we'll have to change that cording foot to the opposite side to stitch across here and then up, okay? So we'll go ahead and do all of that in the machine. Okay, so I'm in the machine and I'm ready to actually sew the top stitching for the zipper. And I just want to double check that I have the right foot on here. And let's have a look at the other foot. So this is the other foot with the right hole. And if I sew this like this, which I could, and then pivot up this way, right? I would actually be hitting the zipper teeth. I'd be writing on the zipper teeth, so I don't want this one. So I want the left-sided hole. So I can sew across this way and then up this way, and I will completely avoid the teeth. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. Now remember, you're going to be sewing on top of the teeth, so you're gonna go slow right here. I'm gonna start here, and then I'm gonna back stitch and then come back to this point and then pivot. Try not to go past the seam. I'm going to start with the needle down. Try to go slow. Sewing. And back. And then back. And if you can't hit right on that point, go ahead and walk. And it looks like I'm good there. So needle all the way down. Then lift your presser foot. And then pivot to go straight up. Now we want to come right on that, or just right on the other side of my mark for 3/8, and I'm gonna stitch up, and I'm coming up to here, stitch as straight as you can, remove this pin. I'm gonna come up here. Once I get to this marking, I'm gonna stop. Okay, then I'm going to lift the presser foot and I'm gonna unzip the zipper, and I'm gonna unpin here, and I'm just going to realign, right? Making sure that I'm still keeping the same where the tape is on the seam allowance here. Make sure that that is all the same, going all the way up to the top so that I can sew that straight line right into where my marking was. And then I'm up at the top and I'm going to back stitch. And now I'm going to take it out of the machine. Okay, so technically my zipper is in. I'm gonna close the zipper. I'm gonna have a look at what that looks like. All right, that looks pretty good. Okay, so the zipper is installed, and we'll just give it one final press to remove the erasable pen marks. And now we're actually ready to talk about this in assessment.